at the summit. One of them was getting Turkey to agree to Sweden's accession. We think we got that commitment. We'll talk about that in a minute. The second was to get the strategic plan for NATO and the resources together to make that work. And the third was to define Ukraine's path for an entryway to NATO. Let me start with the third because it led to the tweet heard around the world, which was when we heard President Zelensky on his way to the summit say that it was absurd that there was not a clear date and entry path for Ukraine. He moderated that a little bit once he was in the presence of President Biden and some of the other leaders. But there was a sense at the end of this that he hadn't gotten a lot more than Ukraine got in 2008 in Bucharest, which is to say everybody was in agreement that there would be no entry until the war ended, and no one could define a timetable because we don't know when the war ends. So tell us how we should think about the way this was carefully worded.
Oh, thank you, David, and great to be my friends from the Aspen Institute. This was a profoundly transformative summit that we had in Vilnius. And sometimes a bit of drama up to the end is unavoidable. Starting with Ukraine. I think our Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg put it when he opened the first ever NATO-Ukraine Commission, which is a massive upgrade of our relationship with Ukraine. And he said something that he also said to the media, I repeated here in Aspen. He said that we are welcoming today in Vilnius Ukraine as an equal, and we are looking forward to welcoming Ukraine as an ally. I come from Romania. I was a very young Romanian ambassador when we started to fight for getting into NATO. And many countries from my region, after the fall of communism, aspired and finally joined NATO. Why? Because we believed in this alliance and we persevered. First time in Madrid, I think you remember, Romania was turned down. We continued. So it's true that in Vilnius, the NATO team and President Biden and Prime Minister Sunak, we spent a lot of time with President Zelensky and his team. And basically we said, listen, it's up to you. If you will consider for you and for the brave people of Ukraine that the glass is half full or half empty. I can say that we are way beyond Bucharest 2008 for obvious reasons. Because Europe has changed, because Russia is waging this barbaric war, because Ukraine is at a different stage. And when we say we cannot extend today an invitation with a clear timetable to Ukraine because this would mean that NATO will enter war against Russia, which is something it is not in our plans. And avoiding escalation is also part of our job. Doesn't mean that Ukraine is not on the way towards membership. I know it, we know it, they know it. How we define the right conditions that we met, that's of course a political question. But I would say, please do not consider that in Vilnius we just had a sort of a cosmetical upgrade of our relationship with Ukraine. It's a profound change, it's a transformation, as the whole summit was a transformation.
Well, the Ukraine Council certainly was, because the last time you had a council within NATO, it was with Russia, so I'm sure it wasn't lost.
Commission.
A commission, right. I'm sure it wasn't lost on Putin that it was Ukraine getting that spot. But at the same time, by saying that there was no way to have them enter until the war is over, almost seems to create a perverse incentive for Putin to keep the war going, even at some low level. And you could argue, of course, this was going at a low level between 2014 and the invasion when it stepped up. So how do you get around the trap of giving Putin a reason to keep the war going, if for no other reason to keep Ukraine out of NATO?
This is a paradox here. And we say in NATO, and also the US-led coalition of nations, 50 nations by and large around the world, helping Ukraine prevail in this war. And the paradox goes like this. The more we give Ukraine now, the sooner peace would arrive. So it's clear that Mr. Putin would like to basically wait us out. He will probably have the same illusion that he had before starting the second stage of the war, because you're right, David, the first stage was 2014, believing that we are not united, that we're not ready to sustain such a big effort. So what we're doing now, we try to mobilize as much as we possibly can, and Vilnius did also that. Ukraine win this war, and also change the strategic calculation of Putin and his regime about the cost-benefit analysis. Because he can say, let's wait out NATO and American elections and European elections, and democracies are, more sensitive to these kind of things. But I believe he is also, if he's making that calculation, to the long list of strategic mistakes he has done, this will be another one on the long list of strategic mistakes. This is something that will help Ukraine not only win this war, but transform this nation into a successful, prosperous, democratic country. And when we say that Ukraine needs to do some more reform, not only win the war, which they will, we say that I know from the case of my country and my region, that there is a lot of reform that needs to be done. There is still a work on governance, on peace economy, not only war economy. So that's why I say with confidence, also here in this great forum, that I know that Ukraine will be with us. The fact that the European Union is also giving them an accession pathway, which is far more accelerated than before, is also good. So if you put NATO and European Union and our commitment to Ukraine, I would say that they will be with us sooner rather than later. And this is, I think, a very good decision that came out from Vilnius.
We only have a few more minutes. It's an unfortunately short interview, and we could go on with you for the longest time. But you heard Susan and Colin Kahl talk before about the question of the decisions made about how to arm Ukraine. And of course, just before the summit, the president made the decision to send the cluster munitions, which most of the NATO members who were there could not have done. They had signed the treaty, obviously, against it. When you were behind closed doors, did you hear criticism of that decision? Did you hear relief that the U.S. had done it, even if Britain, France, Germany, others could not? What was the reaction to it? And how long do you think we're going to need to use these before you can get the traditional unitary munitions to them?
No, our leaders have not touched upon this subject, but they decided, speaking of transformation and the transformative nature of our summit, as you mentioned, we decided to have the most profound transformation of our defense and deterrence planning, force structure, command and control in 40 years. That's in itself, it's a massive deterrence message. Secondly, we decided, and that's something that I think the US, for many years, and many long administrations and Congress, they've been asking European allies and Canada to spend more on defense. It was not fair to have this kind of asymmetry of burden sharing. And all allies have decided in Vilnius that we'll be spending at least 2% of GDP. We also adopted...
And is 2% enough under these conditions, you think?
I think it's the minimum. And you see, I don't know, my country, Romania, 2.5%. But the fact that big economies like Germany, like Italy, like the Netherlands, like many others, like Spain, will be going to 2% or more, it in itself is a massive investment. We also decided, and our leaders decided, to have an industrial action plan, what Colin was discussing in the previous. So what I'm saying that cluster ammunition or not, we are ramping up production, we are revitalizing our industrial base, and what NATO does superbly well is to send a demand signal to both defense industry, because through NATO you can see, through our defense planning processes, what NATO is about and will be investing in. And we are sending a signal not only to the defense, traditional defense sector, but also to the technological sector, to the companies in technology, because the beauty of NATO that we are also helping allies avoid a false dilemma. Now with war in Ukraine and in Europe, that we should invest in conventional high-intensity warfare issues, that's correct. And also, or to invest in high-end capabilities. In NATO, we help allies, all allies, big and small, not to make this mistake. We have to do them both. What they call multidimensional operations means that we need conventional, high-end, and digitalized NATO. So this Vilnius summit was truly transformative.
So, Mircea, you've only been in this job since 2019, although it probably
On this very stage, Jens Stoltenberg at the Security Forum announced that he was picking me as his deputy. And I think he did a pretty good choice.
Right. So you are a creature of Aspen now, right?
I'm a founder of Aspen in Romania 20 years back. Some people here know that.
So you were not around in 2014 when NATO had to go decide how to go respond to the annexation of Crimea and the beginning of the war in the south. But we know that a year after that was when Germany actually signed the Nord Stream 2 agreement. So Putin was probably guessing that the reaction for NATO would be the same, and that after a year all would be forgotten and you'd sort of go back to time as usual. How do you persuade him now that this change is here to stay? Because he must be betting that Europe will crack, that the United States will elect a president who does not believe in pursuing this war the way President Biden has, or that the Ukrainians are going to run out of ammunition.
Listen, I think that the consequences of this formidable strategic error and mistake by Mr. Putin and his regime. Look now at the geography of Europe and NATO. Finland and Sweden, they're adding to the northern flank and to the eastern flank and to the 1 billion citizens of this alliance, something that, Sweden has been neutral since 1812. 1812, after the Napoleon Wars. Finland has been neutral since the Second World War. And what kind of mistake can you make to convince profoundly neutral in the depth of the democracy in Sweden and Finland to join NATO? We are happy to have them with us. And then I think he's also looking to the decisions that we are taking. In a way, he is making NATO become strong. Let me say something about the summit, because we also had a component which was probably not as prominent in the other decisions of our leaders. I chaired a meeting with the foreign ministers of Moldova, Georgia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So while we are doing this, we also know that there is immense pressure, short of war, but against Moldova there is a total hybrid warfare against Maia Sandu's regime. And we are, together with the EU, in the position to try to help. And then we had the second time in a row after our summit in Madrid, the leader of our 4 Indo-Pacific partners, the prime ministers of Japan and Korea and New Zealand, and the president of South Korea. So we are now developing a system of partnerships which is growing more global. So in a way, as the world is transforming, NATO is transforming. And we will be celebrating, and I hope, and I know we'll have a great summit in next year in Washington, our 75th anniversary. The transformation of NATO is ongoing because this great alliance of ours, we have in our gene, in our DNA, that seed of transformation. And I have to say that I'm very proud. I was not in 2014, nobody's perfect, but I think myself and our Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg, I think we should be proud of seeing this alliance, all these allies, new allies, committing more to our transatlantic friendship and to our global system of norms and values.
We are running out of time. I have one very quick last question for you. One of the remarkable things about this war so far that defied early expectations is that we haven't seen vertical escalation, which is to say nuclear, and we haven't seen horizontal escalation, which is to say taking the war beyond Ukraine's borders, beyond the Moldova example, but certainly not into NATO territory. How long can that last? If you're Putin, do you calculate that as an indefinite set, or that's his last move?
We mentioned that the war against his neighbors started with Georgia 2008, and then 2014, and now. The hybrid warfare against the West has never stopped. Intelligence, coercion, subversion of our democracies, critical infrastructures, cyber attacks. I also run cyber adaptation innovation at NATO. We're not speaking that much publicly about things that are going on. So this is nothing new, and we are also preparing ourselves for that kind of horizontal escalation. We are working together with the European Union on undersea critical infrastructures and resilience together. So what we are also very vigilant in is that to making sure that, of course, deterrence and defense in a more traditional sense, but I think, and also there are lots of business leaders here in this audience and watching us. There will be a premium on economic security in the years to come. As we had the peace dividend collected for decades after the fall of communism and Soviet Empire, we are now in the situation to look into a new generation of supply chain, of technologies, of security, of resilience. And this is something that we also have to calculate and include in our bottom lines. Because this is, and as we say in NATO, resilience is the first line of defense. How strong our societies and our economies are.
Well, Mircea, we could do this forever, and you and I have been known to do that, but you have another panel to go on. The good news for everybody here is you're on that next panel, so I'm going to get out of your way and let others get up here, and thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you, David. Thank you all.